Welcome to the SmartQA musings, which is a gentle, very interesting thoughts. And today's musings is kind of inspired by some of the current news. Therefore, I think you might find the topic name musing will be interesting. I read about 3 articles over the last maybe couple of weeks. One was on green energy and coal. Other one, I think, which is now popular, all of us know, Cockroaches party. And of course, the third, the distressing problem of oil, where we have seen 3 oil prices increase, strangulation of the Strait of Hormuz. So I thought it'll be, so when I was pondering about it, something kind of struck, and I thought, there is some interesting connection that I can see with respect to what they're talking about. And maybe it might be an interesting musing therefore. And to make this musing a little more interesting, we thought that we will probably do it in a more conversational webcast. So, hopefully we'll probably do an interesting conversation between me and Avani, who's here. So, welcome to the SmartQA musings.
Thank you. So I see there are these 3 images that have been sitting with me, and they form completely different worlds. I mean, one is about energy, the other one is about political thing, which is very strange, which happened online, and one is about oil ship, and nothing is so obvious connecting them.
Yeah, that's, I had the same feeling, the feeling that, hey, each one of them seems so disparate, so different, describing something that we assumed was working. But it's not quite working the way we thought it probably was. The notion of green energy, the upcoming party, and of course, the trouble of Hormuz.
Yes, that is it. Not that the efforts were wrong, not that nothing changed, but something essentially had not shifted. The visible thing had changed, the deeper thing had not.
Yeah, the interesting shift was when the article on coal talked about, was on green energy, and which I think as a world we're all trying to pioneer. Electric vehicles are here, and so on, solar is here, etc. But interestingly, there seems to be a problem where we still use coal to generate electricity. And so, obviously, there is a bit of an interesting, is it changing? And therefore, that's why I kept on coming back to one word, and that was like, maybe the connecting word for some of these could be, because we're biased towards testing, assurance. Not assurance as a checklist or a phrase, but something much older than that. Something like the ability of a system to hold together when various contradictions show up. The contradiction of coal and, let's say, solar. And I'm quite sure you'll find interesting contradictions that will arise in the context of the CJP and the others. But then the idea was to look at assurance in the context of maybe contradictions.
Which is actually a very different way to think about it. Because usually we think of assurance, it's all about removing the contradictions. But maybe it is more about seeing it early enough, understanding it deeply enough, holding it wisely enough for things to continue for longer.
Indeed, it is a very different starting point. And I think when we talk about smart QA and we say smart, what do we really mean? Is it just the notion of the intellectual ability and intelligence, or is it really about working with the various challenges and contradictions that arise? That's, I think, what makes it a very different starting point.
It is. So now, should we just take one story at a time?
Yes, let's start with the whole story.
So this story is about India's energy transition, and on the surface, it looks like a success story. Solar parks across Rajasthan, wind turbines along the coast. The number are genuinely impressive, renewable, and now 40% of installed capacity. The language everywhere is transition, progress, green future, and all good, like all positive.
Yeah, I know we've been, the fact that we've got COP and we've got 2030 and numbers, and where we have to shift our energy from pollution to green. I think there has been a lot of story that's been going around that, hey, we're doing a lot of good work. We have got 42%. Let's really look at what really generated the electricity. This year, it's coal. India is a very coal dependent country. 71% of the actual generation is coal. Still, oh, by the way, don't forget, Indian coal is it's not necessarily the good coal. Generates a lot of ash. Right? Yeah.
Still, and that is the thing, nothing was fake. The solar parks are real, okay? The investment is real, the intent is real, and yet every evening when the sun goes down, the demand that keeps going on.
Yep. The grid is always reaching for the coal, isn't it? That's where it is.
Maybe it's because a power system does not run on capacity alone. It runs on continuity, on reliability, on the ability to carry load when conditions are not ideal. And coal is still thing that does that. It's not just the villain, but it's more like a stabilizer in the story.
True. We always think of coal as a villain because it pollutes, right? But that's really the uncomfortable part. But the catch with the green energy that we know of now is the fact that it's dependent on sun and the wind, and sun and the wind don't come 24 hours. And so it's not really the villain either. It's actually a promise, but it needs storage. We need to store the energy that we generate in wind or the daytime energy from solar into someplace. So we need storage, we need flexible grids, we need new infrastructure, and it has to carry the full weight.
So the contradiction, that is real. The society wants to grow, but not to destroy. Wants to transition, but not collapse. Wants future, but has to keep the pressure to keep it alive.
That's true.
That stayed me though. It's not actually coal. It is the confidence, the genuine belief that the transition was further along than it was, because the capacity numbers were so real. So people reasonably felt like something has changed.
Yeah, I like to put it in a one-liner sutra, so to speak, and I think it's more like transformation begins when dependence shifts. And, I see, the fact that what you talked about is not actually the goal in the confidence. I see that in teams, a genuine move to new practices, rules. We talk about assurance, right? We have new practices, new processes, new tools. Everyone believes it. But then something gets complicated along the way, a tricky release, a bit of a deadline, a real pressure, and you watch the system reach for what it is always reached for. That's a bit of a contradiction, right?
Yeah, like the coal under the solar panels.
Yes, it is not a choice to go backward, just that the new thing has not gone deep enough yet to carry the load when it actually mattered.
Oh. So the question is not whether the new things arrived, it is whether it went deep enough to shift what the system is actually dependent on.
That's what I was trying to tell you in the context of solar. And its transformation begins and actual dependence shifts.
And I think in assurance, visible progress can be so seductive. Sometimes new things get named, measured, celebrated. But quieter question is, when pressure arises, what does the system still leans on? Sometimes the old dependency just hides under new vocabulary. The system looks transformed, but it has not yet outgrown what it was actually built on.
Through that, it's the under pressure what supports. We have got dashboards and stuff like that. That's what we need to really look at, isn't it?
Yeah. The second story. This reminds me of the second story, which is very strange. And somewhere in the internet, there is this name which is appearing everywhere: Cockroach Janta Party.
Yeah, it's kind of it sounds like a joke, right?
Yeah. Completely a meme. A passing irritation is a political costume, and then it starts moving. People share it, laugh at it, like we are doing, and to it, anger, humor, exhaustion, sarcasm, all of it starts gathering around this one odd symbols, and in 4 days, something with no office, no structure, no history starts to look alive.
Yes, it is cockroach like. Well, everything emerges from the cracks and it survives ridicule. It multiplies for certainly attention. And it's like a swarm. It doesn't have structure, but it swarms.
But it is not really about the party, okay? It is about the world that makes that possible, where institution feels distant and slow and disconnected, where one careless gesture can ignite reaction at digital speed, where old structures that need committees and campaigns and months of patient work just cannot keep up.
Yeah, we see that, right? We talked about it also, I think, in one of those earlier webcasts on the newer party, Tamil Nadu, so to speak, which
Yeah.
kind of formed very quickly, worked to seem to be a digital speed, and this is probably outdone that speed. We're talking about days rather than weeks, right? And so digital speed kind of waits for nothing. A symbol becomes a swarm before anyone is thought to ask, can this swarm remember? Can it commit? Because it seems to be just coming in a hurry.
Yeah. And that is the question. Underneath the excitement, can outrage organize? Can energy that erupts this fast become something durable?
That's an important word, durable. Can energy endure? And that's what we're talking. And of course, I think we see that in our current context. I guess we are all well aware of what's happening in the AI world and how AI seems to be there everywhere. So I guess that's a connection that we'll probably establish. And I that's something that I think about with AI every few months, every few weeks, every few days. Today, another wave arrives. The demos are genuinely remarkable. And there is this collective feeling that something is shifting and we are moving, and that's it. It seems it's not false. It seems that the energy is very real.
And then
And then some teams build something that will be standing and trustworthy maybe in the next couple of years. While there are others who will ride the wave. And when the wave passes, they're more or less where they are, hoping and waiting for the next wave to arrive.
because I think that intensity and resilience are not the same thing. They feel the same from inside the wave, but they are built from completely different materials.
Yes, resilience needs continuity. Resilience is about slow accumulation, practice that does not depend on how you feel about it that week. It's just possibly boring.
So perhaps the quieter question is not what we are riding right now, but what we are building that we can outlast the wave.
That's very genuinely uncomfortable to sit with, riding the wave versus building the wall.
It should be. That is the sutra. What erupts is not always that endures.
Yeah, that's a second sutra, I think, from the corporate center party.
Yeah.
And in assurance too, a new wave arrives. Maybe there's a new tool. Of course, today tools are slightly different because everything is as AI, so to speak. Everything feels energetic, everything feels alive. But something that can rise very quickly and still not acquire the discipline to last. That was the swarm. It's not the structure. Interestingly, over the last few days, I've been reading some very interesting articles. One of them, in fact, from Bertrand Meyer, very esteemed software engineering gentleman, who has a very interesting article on the RZ, AX, RID.org, where he talks about, is it time that we possibly have formal models coexisting with AI to build applications? So swarm is not the structure. And in an assurance, new wave arrives. Everything feels energetic, live, and so on. And swarm is not the structure. Resilience needs the continuity, slow accumulation, practice that does not depend on how you feel about it that week. And that, I think, brings about the third story. Imagine a ship, somewhere on the sea, carrying oil. which the oil has been extracted, it has been bought, it has been paid for, sitting in the ship. Of course, as you can see, it's sitting in between the Straits of Hormuz, stuck. And there is a destination and an economy genuinely waiting for it.
Factories, households, farms, all of them connected to this barrel in ways they may not even be aware of.
Yes, the product does exist. The need does exist. On paper, the transaction is complete.
But the sea is no longer just water.
That is true. And around the ship, there are invisible gates. The insurance that has dried up, therefore the ship cannot go because it can be destroyed. Sanctions that have been put into place where the ship cannot go because sanctions are not there. When it's there. Payment systems that are hesitating to accept currency in a certain form. Freight costs that have spiked crazily because of the war. Points that have been choked. Ports that may have to delay. Banks that may not have processed. Roads that may simply close. So we just seem to have a lot of invisible gates.
The oil is there, but usefulness has not arrived. A barrel is not energy until it reaches life.
This is where the story kind of turns. Not long ago, access felt like enough. Kind of like the product word, right? Do we have the product? Yes. Do we have the supply? Yes, we're fine. But in a stable word, possession seems to be arriving, but it is not. Producing a product is not having the product in the hands of the consumer who actually benefits from it.
But possession is only the beginning now. Utility depends on this whole invisible system, the shipping, the financial architecture, the geopolitical situation that carries the product into life. And then the system becomes unreliable. The product can exist completely and still not arrive.
Yes, and this is one that I find very genuinely radical because it breaks a belief that runs very deep that something is good and present and needed. It will reach the people who will depend on it. Possession is not arrived because utility is still waiting for this.
And assurance that has also carried this belief for a long time.
Yes, there is a version of assurance that ends the moment is declared. And that means the work is done, the criteria is met, and the release is shipped, and we think it's all complete. And that's like the oil in the ship, which is stuck in the Straits of Hormuz, right?
And then there is another version also, which is like much harder, when assurance is the only real, when it has actually arrived, where the confidence has traveled all the way to the person, the moment that it is needed.
Yes, just like the oil that exists, and the question is whether it cleared the water.
That is the sutra now. What exists has not yet become useful.
Absolutely. So it's not just about the product, it's about the utility of the product. And that's really what probably smart assurance is all about. And so when we talk about assurance and talk about real assurance, so to speak, the product may exist, a feature may work, the release may live, but yet something may not still reach the user's life as confidence or ease or value. The product is present and utility is still waiting somewhere in the journey. And of course, now we have this wonderful stuff that's going around destroying probably a crore of people. Talk about this OSM, on-screen marking of the CBSC, etc. Right? And the utility got destroyed so badly that probably a lot of children's future is probably hanging in the balance.
Yeah.
So the product, is it done? Looks like it is.
So now when you put all the three stories together, something appears slowly. Paul asks whether transformation has reached dependence. The cockroach asks whether intensity has become endurance. The ship asks whether the product has become utility.
And I think they're pointing at the same contradiction and assurance. We want change without disturbing continuity. We want speed without losing depth. And new tools without changing the thinking. Transformation without rewiring ourselves.
And maybe that is exactly where assurance gets hard. And maybe that is also where it gets meaningful.
Yeah, because its assurance is not confirming something exists, right? It's not just confirming it works either. It's also not just confirming it shipped.
It asks what still carries the system when pressure arrives, what remains after the intensity fades, whether what was built actually reached the life it was meant to serve.
And I think honestly that kind of shift can happen only when the practitioner changes. An inward shift, not outward. Inwardly when the pressure gets sensed, the contradiction gets held. Then whether the user's world enter the inside the work that we do.
And that shift, it is quieter than a new tool, slower than a new process. You cannot put it on a dashboard.
But without it, the old dependence just stays under whatever new vocabulary we give it. I think that's an interesting contradiction that we probably have in the current times. I'd like to say something about the idea of balance. Right? It's a word that gets very misread. Like it means a balance, we say, is standing in the middle, not committing, playing it safe.
It is not that.
It's not that. It's actually probably intelligence under tension. Knowing what must change and what must continue. When speed actually helps, when it just hollows things out and there goes a slowdown. Knowing when the product is fine, but the life around it is still very unsupported. So balance is really intelligence and attention, not standing in the middle.
And that kind of knowing, it does not come from a single insight. It comes from practice, repeated, slow, and unglamorous.
You said it right. Repeated, slow, and glamorous. And small acts of attention repeated until they become natural. Questioning that's repeated until assumption becomes visible. Probing until depth becomes instinctive.
Reflection until feedback is actually usable. Empathy until the user's world stops feeling like it outside the work. Unlearning until old certainty loosens its grip.
So we talked about transformation earlier and complete rewiring of the way we think and do. And now we're talking about the habits, which are really the quietest structure, infrastructure of intelligence. Where we said the balance is about intelligence and attention. Habits are really the infrastructure of intelligence.
That is exactly how a practitioner become capable of holding contradictions without rushing to flatten them.
And none of that announces itself. It's not dramatic. But that's when the real shift lives. And as you can see in the picture, which is titled Quiet Infrastructure, you see attention, questioning, probing, reflection, empathy, unlearning. That's cyclical motion which builds your habits, right?
Yeah. So 3 images, one last time. Coal-based green energy, a promise of transformation, still dependent on what it hopes to outgrow.
Cockroaches like resilience, a burst of collective force searching for a discipline to endure.
Oil stuck in a ship, a product present in the world not useful to life.
Yet 3 stories, 3 uneasiness, 3 mirrors.
And they leave us with something different. Assurance asks whether transformation has reached dependence, whether intensity has become durable capacity, whether product has become the lived utility.
Yes, indeed. So it's not just about the assurance, right? It's the assurance as a delivered activity. Smartness is about somebody depends on it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody.